Welcome back to the Boojum-Verse, everyone, and part 2 of our Wormhole Survival Guide. In part 1, we discussed an overview of JSpace, we talked about our UI and HUD layout, as well as how to use your probe scanners. Here in part 2, we're going to be discussing how to use DScan, forging the chain, looking through wormholes, figuring out what is on the other side of that wormhole, as well as bookmarks and creating perch points. Thank you all for joining, and look out for part 3. Flight Aegis, everyone. So let's talk about the directional scanner. Let's talk about the directional scanner here in JSpace. Now, as we mentioned before, I really like to have my system window up here so that we can see where the DScan coverage extends to. At a quick glance, I can see that if there was a ship over here on these moons, I would not be able to see them appearing on DScan because that is out of range, right? Conversely, all these other bookmarks and cosmic signatures have little green circles around them, so I know that they are within DScan range. Now, with multiple accounts, as we nomad around, I will often go between accounts, and as I do, I look at where this coverage is in the system map, and I can, between all of my accounts, maximize that coverage. So, for example, if there was a wormhole way out here in the top corner somewhere, and I descan on this character, I'm like, well, I'm not going to get any results from that, but this character was over next to that wormhole, I could descan there and maximize my system coverage to help me keep SA on what all is happening within the wormhole, right? Hover over the map, hold DScan, and scroll to change range quickly. That's true, you can. You can do that way, like this. That's actually, I actually didn't know that, Sam. You can change the range that way by holding the DScan button and scrolling in and out. That's spectacular. You can also do that same thing by mousing over the range and scrolling in and out. There we go. Mouse over range here. Scroll in and out. See that? That works too. You can change it from kilometers to AU if you really want to, but psychopaths use kilometers, I think. AU is better. Use it to quick find out what planet people are on. Exactly, Sam. So let's use a practical example here. So you can see that we've got our prospect is hanging out on a perch site. I call this a perch site because it's not on the actual gas site itself, but it is on grid. So this gas site over here is 752 kilometers away. So I can see people on the gas site. I can warp to things on the gas site because they're on grid with me, but we're nice and far away. Anytime you're making a perch, the important thing is that you are outside of warp distance, so greater than 150 kilometers to something that you can warp to, either your bookmark or an anomaly, an MTU, stuff like that. 700 a bit much, 200 to 300 is typical. That is true. That is true. As long as, like I said, the important thing, greater than 150. You want to be as close as you can, but greater than 150 so that you can be quick, fast to warp on things. Let's say now we're hanging out here watching our little C2, this little C2 exit, and we want to suddenly, as we're descanning here. Oh my goodness. Lo and behold, as we are descanning, oh, there's something on descan. A prospect. Its name is Onisu-2. Whatever happened to Onisu-1, we don't know. Definitely didn't die. But this prospect is named Onisu-2, and it's out there somewhere. How do we find it? Now, there are several ways to do this. I would say that the kind of being fast with D-scan, which is a weird thing to say, being fast on D-scan is all about having situational awareness on what is happening inside the wormhole. So, for example, I'm D-scanning. There's a prospect on D-scan. What do prospects do? Well, they love to hoover down gas sites. Prospects love those gas sites, right? So there's a very high possibility that this prospect is at a gas site. So what can I do to very quickly find it? Well, let's go to a 5-degree angle. I've already got all the gas sites located out here in JSpace. So now let's change our name, or sorry, our type to gas sites. I'm going to hold D-scan here, and I'm going to click on each of these gas sites, and you'll see we're now going to direct that 5-degree beam at each of these gas sites. Nothing on that first one. Oh, there they are on the second one. Hey, look at that. Our prospect is there. Now I can literally just hit warp 2 here, and we're on the way to go get ourselves a prospect kill, right? Pretty simple. Pretty simple. I can also see on my map which one it is. It selects it for me automatically. So that, with SA, if you know what people are doing, can help you find things very, very, very quickly, right? The same can be applied to ships that you know are ratting ships, for ships that are going and doing PI and going to moons for the different customs depots, explorers that are looking at relic and data sites. All this can help you find what's in your system a lot faster, right? Makes it quick. That's why having all these things scanned down is so important, because it really helps you understand what's happening in your wormhole. It can help you use D-scan that much better. The primary thing we're doing, though, is just utilizing this to know who's in the system, to keep SA, and really for defense, to understand, yep, there's other people here who want to stay cloaked, or it's safe to go and rat, it's safe to go get gas, it's safe to do other things, right? Things like that. Which right now, it is. Relatively. So you would just keep on D-scanning. Okay, so let's say we didn't know exactly where they were, or maybe they're in a safe spot, maybe they're not at one of these cosmic signatures. They're out in a safe place, right? How would we find them? So we would start off. What I like to do first is start off with range. So I see something's on D-scan. I'm now going to hold D-scan on the map, zoom in, scan. Okay, they're still at 9.5. Can zoom in again. Scan. Still at 5.9, which you can see here. I'm looking at the range down here. Scan. Okay. Zoom in a bit more. Scan. Oh, they're out of range now. Let's bump our range back out a little bit. Still not there. Bump it back out a little bit. Oh, now they're on D-scan. Now they're showing up. So in this case, I know that they're somewhere within 5.9. And they're at one of these locations that has a green circle around them. So this guy, this guy, this guy. They're at one of those locations, or they're in a safe spot. They're at none of those locations, right? After we've got the range solved, the next thing I typically do is I solve for the actual location, the actual angle. So I like to go to a 180-degree angle. You can see here we've got it set to 180 degrees, so half of our sphere, and we scan this way. So with that 180-degree scan, we'll go there. You can also see that if you look in space, that also changes where your D-scan looks. You can hold the scanner and your left mouse button, and you can, if you hold scan and left mouse, you'll move your scanner around as well by being over the actual system map. But you can just also look around in space, and that will move your scanner around. So we'll go scan this way. Like, oh no, they're not on this side. Let's scan back this way. Ah, there they are. There's that prospect. Okay. Now I can start to narrow this down. Ooh. Looks like we lost them. They're not on scan anymore. Oh, there they are. So what I like to do is, if there are known locations where they could be, I try to make sure those stay within my scan volume as I now narrow my angle down to attempt to keep on figuring out where they're at. And eventually you get to a spot where you've narrowed it down enough where they're at, you're at a 5 degree and you've figured out generally where they are. Like I said, using this by holding scan and clicking on each of those locations is much faster if they are at a site. If that gas site was not here though and they weren't there, this is realistically like one of the fastest ways you're gonna be. You're gonna have to manually move around to find where these guys are so that you can eventually use combat probes to locate them. And then, once you've got that location pinpointed, now we can do something like kicking our probes out here, setting it at a 0.25, or actually, if these were combat probes, at a 0.5 AU scan. And with our with our D-scan direction set, we can go put our probes right where we know that location is, and then we can scan this guy down with a single click, which is nice. Make sure to set this back to 360 and set this back up to max range when you're done descanning whatever you're doing, so that you don't forget. And while you're sitting here hoovering down some gas or hacking and exploring, you're descanning into the middle of nowhere in a 5 degree angle, and you're getting no scan results back, and you think you're safe. But really, there's someone quickly approaching and lurking to jump up on you and get you. The filters on here are very important. They are very important. So, if we look at the top of our scan results window, you can see there is... You can align with the solar system map camera, which is kind of insane. I don't like this view because it makes it very difficult for me to figure out what I'm looking at. Versus this view where I move the scanner instead of moving the solar system. So move the solar system around versus moving the scanner around. This makes way more sense to me. My God. You've got your solar system map that you can open and close from the D-scan results window. And then the most important thing is your filters, right? So these filters are where you make or break your ability to D-scan well. Right now, it says there's no scan results, but I've filtered 87 of them. Oh my. So if I go to General All here, look at all these things that are actually on D-scan. All of which I really don't care about that much, except for to know that in this wormhole, somebody's got one or several player-owned stations, so POSs, they're those little sticks. They got a whole bunch of guns and artillery and a bunch of other random stuff in here. There's also an Eve Scout rescue cache here too, which is awesome. I don't really care about those things right now when it comes to hunting or preventing being hunted, right? What I care about are ships. So I filter those. Now, if you go to our in-game chat, the Boojum, we have a couple of different overview settings that we use. The primary one that we use is called Z to S overview. That is what's going to set up your filters. So your overview settings are what allows you to choose your filters here. We're not going to go super in-depth into this right now because that is a rabbit hole. But if we go to our overview settings here, the filters in your D-scan window are tied to the overview filter settings here that you can create and edit and fit. So you can see these are my D-scan filters. I've got one that I use for hunting, which has drones included. I've got one that I use running that doesn't have drones. I've got one that's for defense, which is just ships. So I use mainly hunting with drones and defensive primarily. The important thing is that they are tied to your filters. You can also tie your D-scan settings to whatever your active tab on your overview is if you want to. I recommend you do not do that. I recommend you keep your D-scan results different than your overview tab, because you really want them to be different in JSpace. I want to make sure that this is never messed up. We may or may not have lost a ship because we were not D-scanning what we thought we were D-scanning because we were on the wrong overview tab and we had them linked. So that's a quick overview and explanation of D-scan and how it's used. There's way more that goes into it. It really is an art to get good at it. How far have we made it? How far are we in our tutorial? We made it to D-scanning, guys. We're 3 items in. Let's talk about forging the chain. When it comes to forging the chain, what do we mean by that? In short, it is how we go from one location, one system to another through a wormhole, right? So there's a lot that goes into this. We're going to start with wormhole identification, which is really the first step. We've scanned down a wormhole. We found one. Here it is. We warp not to 0. We warp to 70 kilometers on the wormhole because we don't know where it goes yet. And once we are on grid, we are going to cloak up if we need to. So we're nice and safe. We're going to look at this wormhole and identify it and figure out where it goes. And then we're going to decide if we want to go through it or not. If you're in high sec or low sec or anywhere in K space, the same process applies. We're going to find the wormhole. We're going to go take a look at it and decide if we want to go in there or not. And then once we get on the other side, we're going to do a bunch of stuff. This is forging the chain. We continue this every time we jump from wormhole to wormhole, and thus the chain grows, which is spectacular. That's where mapping tools can come in, where bookmarking is important. Okay. So let's take a look at this wormhole. This is a C2 wormhole, and large ships can pass through this thing. It is stable, and it is fresh. What do I mean by all of those statements? And how do we know that? Just by looking at it. Each wormhole, if you zoom in on the center here, gives you a glimpse into what is on the other side of that wormhole. In this case, you can see as we look through the looking glass, look through the lens of this wormhole, there's a nebula in there. This black spot here in the iris of the wormhole, this black spot right here, tells me that this is a C2 wormhole, a Class 2 wormhole. Now, if you click on the wormhole itself, you can also see it says wormhole K162. When you're nomading through JSpace, and I would say pragmatically, realistically, the only wormhole number identifier that you really care about is K162. K162 means that this wormhole I'm looking at right here is the exit to the other end. So on the other side of this wormhole, in that C2, in that Class 2 wormhole, that would be called the entrance. This one is the exit. What that means is that that wormhole originated in the C2 and connected to the wormhole that I'm in, which is a C3, a Class 3 wormhole. Why that's important is for understanding when wormholes are showing up in yours. So in this case, somebody in that C2 may have rolled that wormhole and the exit appeared here. A K162 that shows up in my system generally leads me to believe that there are other active players on the other side of that wormhole. and they could be coming through or waiting for me on the other side, in general. Okay, that's why I think K162 is important. This is going to be an in-depth tutorial. We're going kind of off the deep end here. So, they are also known as wandering wormholes. That's true. That is true. The important thing to note is that they are an exit. Somebody on the other end is there potentially and could have opened this wormhole for us. Okay. Let's talk about how we know this is a C2. We've got that little black dot there. That's how we know this one's a C2 specifically. If I were looking at this wormhole and there was a red dot, I would know that it's a C3. And you say to yourself, Boojum, what does that red dot look like? How do you know? I'll show you. There it is. That giant nebula there, that red nebula is what you would see looking into a C3 wormhole. We are in a C3. I can tell I'm in a C3 just by looking at the nebula. It's got this. All Class 3 wormholes have this big red sort of splotch. Just like all C2 wormholes, which we're going to go take a look at in a second here, have this sort of black-looking splotch. Okay. Let's talk about the factors of a wormhole. There's two things primarily. Three, actually. There is the longevity of the wormhole, or the lifespan of the wormhole. 24-ish hours is the maximum. There is the stability of a wormhole that is affected by ships passing through the wormhole. The more mass that goes through a wormhole, the less stable it becomes. And the third factor that you can tell just by looking at the wormhole is what size ships can go through the wormhole. Those are the three things you can see, along with the class, you can see just by looking at it. How easy to get trapped in a wormhole? You've always seen them as the dangerous unknown, where there is no returning. Hoot, it's only you can only get trapped in a wormhole if you don't bring a way to scan wormholes down, or you're not very diligent about your bookmarks. So as long as you have probe scanners and can scan wormholes down, it is impossible for you to be trapped in a wormhole, because you can just scan down wormholes that will lead back to K-space or to other wormholes. Even if you brought no scanners in and you do a good job of bookmarking wormholes, as long as you leave before the wormhole closes and collapses, you'll be good. But if you're in a wormhole and it collapses, then you by yourself solo will not be able to find a new wormhole, because it has to be scanned down. So somebody else would need to scan it down for you and then lead you to it, which I've done many times. I've gone and found people in J-Space to go and scan down sites for them and let them fleet warp to me, or use bookmarks and get them back out of J-Space before. In fact, Eve Scouts and Signal Cartel make it their business to help you escape from J-Space if you get lost, and they are very, very good at it. The average time, if you have no idea where you are in J-Space except for the J number, the system name, the average time for them to find you and rescue you is 8 days. That's impressive. Over 2,500 wormholes. Over 2,500 wormholes. Takes them only 8 days to find you. We already said that looking into the iris of the wormhole allows you to classify the wormhole itself. Let's take another example. This wormhole is a nullsec wormhole. You literally see what is happening on the other side of this wormhole in nullsec, in K-space. That is where this is. So let's play a game. Let's see if we can't figure out where... Stand by. That's the sound of a splash that just occurred on, I think it was this C2 site. So we're just going to keep on D-scanning. We're ready to hit T here. Ooh, a venture. And I know I've seen this signal, this name before. Vepers. This person looks familiar to me. This person looks familiar. We got a contract for a giveaway. Ooh, thank you, Rook, to remind me about that in a little bit. So, this will be a quick aside really quick. Let's see what happens when a venture shows up. Or anybody shows up, right? Let's run some quick background checks on this person. Vepers. Throw them up on Z-Kill. See what they're up to. They just came from a C2. They're probably wormholers. They have 0 kills. They've lost 0 ships. That's not true. They've lost 2 ships in a C5 and a C3, and they were born in May. Quite young. They're almost certainly an alt account. Yep. Definitely an alt. Member of Orion Security Systems. Cool, cool, cool. For 4 days. Their employment history, School of Applied Knowledge, and then Orion Security Systems. They were in the School of Applied Knowledge since... Oh, actually, they were born in... Oh, yeah, so 208 days. Not too bad. Okay. Cool. They're still out there somewhere, so now let's see. Can we scan down this little venture? Let's see where they're at. They're probably at a safe spot, or maybe going to try and get some gas, right? Let me answer some of your questions first, though, really quick. So there are an exhaustive number of wormholes. You can't lose any items when if you can eventually find it. That is correct. That is correct. There are a specific number of wormholes, a little over 2,500. Let's see. Riggs, when would you decide to go in or just leave it? We're going to talk about that in a second, Riggs. Remind me if I don't talk about it, but really, we're probably not going to go into a wormhole that I think is end of life and could collapse at any moment, or is so unstable that it may collapse due to my ship passing through it, trapping me on that side. Sometimes I will go through those wormholes intentionally to bring my fleet through very quickly and hope that it collapses behind me or keeps other people from following me. But we're nomading. I don't care if a wormhole closes behind us. It's no big deal for us. There's a lot of wormholes here. There's a lot of wormholes. Okay, so let's see what is Duffy up to here. Let's do a little practical experiment. See if we can't find Duffy and see if we can't get a kill with our Tengu, huh? All right, so we got a little venture here out here mining. If we're super lucky, they would be actually... Oh my god, we are super lucky. They're on grid with us right here. Oh my goodness. Look at them there. This little venture here. Sitting here on grid, hoovering up this gas. So I want to show you guys how unbelievably difficult it is to get a kill here. Unbelievably difficult to kill a venture. Okay, so we've got our Tengu here. We're going to warp to our perch point, the little gas perch point that we have there, next to our friend and Boojum. So we're going to warp to 20 clicks off of our friend so we don't uncloak ourselves. And this is why I say getting ventures and prospects, even with a perch point setup, is so difficult on these gas sites. You really have to have a lot of bookmarks set in there to be able to, like, tie these guys down. Here's what is going to happen, I guarantee it. We are going to try to warp to this spot right here. It's going to uncloak us. I mean, we could try to slow boat our way over here. The problem is we're just a little too far away. So, as you can see, this person should be moving. Yes, they're in a nice orbit, so that makes this very difficult. But we're going to warp to the center here. We're going to try to get them as quickly as we can. We're going to uncloak along the way, and they are very likely going to warp off and escape. They're probably also pretty fast. That's just the way it's going to be. So we're going to uncloak as we go. If anything, we'll give them a little spook, a little scare, though. Why do we uncloak? So we can immediately start to approach this person and get AB going. We also have our wrong missiles loaded. We really want javelins loaded. Try to lock them up as quick as we can. And if we can get a couple of shots off, that'd be cool. We're in range for it, which is nice. They might not be paying attention. We've got our AB going. We're approaching as quick as we can. They should escape. Yep, there they go. Looks like they went to the sun, so we're going to warp to that. We'll go to 100, expecting that they may have done that as well. If I had my combat fit for my Astero, we'd be camping that C2 wormhole. But realistically, they should get out of there pretty easily. See if they jump twice. They either hit a safe or they went back to a C2. They retreated back into the C2. Classic. Okay. So, almost got him. Almost got him. But you can see it's pretty tricky. Pretty tricky to get them if they're paying attention. If they're AFK, yeah, that's where you get those easy kills, right? Anybody who's AFK is a gift from Bob. Truly, truly a gift from Bob, or the AFK players. All right, let's go back to what we were talking about. We're going to try and identify this null spot. The ventures and the prospects are so slippery. So slippery. Now, the reason I knew we were not going to get them is because our warp scrambler range is 11 kilometers. So if we could get the warp scrambler on, we would have had them, but we'd have to be within 11 kilometers. But even with a Tengu, even with like the max application damage that we can have, they still are able to get away. They've got a, yep, and they have that bonus to warp core strength. So you couldn't even use a warp disruptor. If I had a 25 kilometer warp disruptor that I had applied and actually got on them, they could have still warped off. By doing nothing, they can just warp away, because a warp disruptor only does one warp core strength disruptor. Let's talk about identifying this guy. So this guy goes out into nullsec, right? Yeah, you need at least 3. That's it. It needs at least 3. That's right, to overcome. Which the warp scrambler gives you. The venture's got +2. That's what it is, yeah. And the prospect. And the prospect. Yeah, getting a prospect and a venture kill on a gas site especially is super difficult. On ore sites, a lot easier. A lot easier. Okay, so looking through this wormhole, this is more than you really need. Really what we care about is like, hey, this goes to K space and it goes to nullsec. How do we know that? Well, if we look at the information on this wormhole, we can see it says an unstable wormhole deep in space. Wormholes of this kind usually collapse after a few days. 1 day. They always collapse in 1 day. And can lead to anywhere. This wormhole seems to lead to null security space. So the information tab tells you literally where it goes. For high sec, for null sec, and for low sec. It also tells you where it goes for Thera and Pochvin. If it goes to Thera, it'll say this leads to the mysterious wormhole known as Thera. For Pochvin, it says it leads to Triglavian space. Oh, we're back. Friends are back for more. More interruptions. Exciting interruptions. Duffy's back again. Hello, Duffy. They cloaked on grid here. Interesting. Okay. Let's give him a little praise Bob, shall we? A little book of Bob. We got a new friend in the wormhole. Happy that they're alive and savvy. Now then, wormholes. If you click on information for this wormhole, a wormhole that leads to wormhole space, to J space, will not tell you what class it goes to. You have to be able to identify that by looking at it or going into the wormhole itself. In this case, it says, this wormhole seems to lead into unknown parts of space. If it says unknown parts of space, you know that is leading to J space. That is leading to wormhole space. It does break it apart into a little bit of nuance in class, though. C1 through C3 say unknown parts of space. C4 and C5 class wormholes will say this wormhole seems to lead you into dangerous parts of space. And then the C6 wormhole will say this wormhole leads you into deadly parts of space. Exactly. Okay. You can also see the time that is left on this wormhole. This wormhole is beginning to decay and probably won't last another day. That means there is somewhere between 4 hours left on this wormhole and 24 hours left on this wormhole. When this now says this wormhole is beginning to decay and is approaching its end of life, or is EOL, that means there is between 4 hours and like minutes left on the wormhole. Very little time left. That's how long the lifespan of it remains. Now we get into its stability. This wormhole has not yet had its stability significantly disrupted by ships passing through it. So this is a stable wormhole. Just little guys, little amounts of mass maybe have gone through this here and there, but it's a stable wormhole, no big deal. And then it says larger ships can pass through this wormhole. So like I said, we knew all of that information that's on that information tab just by looking at it. So if you go to EVE University or EVE Wiki, they've got some great wormhole guides on how to identify the different classes of them. You can identify them by the iris, the class by the iris, the stability of the wormhole is identified by how wobbly it is. So you can kind of see that this wormhole, the iris sort of pulsates a little bit. This is a weird thing to there's no other way to describe this, but this is what it pulsates like this. Don't clip that. As it gets more wobbly, pulsating more, wibbly wobbly, that's less and less stable. Sorry, that's closer and closer to its end of life. The wobbliness is its time left, its longevity. So the more wibbly wobbly, the more closer it is to end of life. Like super wibbly wobbly ones will be like very close to end of life. This one's not very wibbly wobbly. It's not really undulating super jellyfish. It's a little jellyfish. Slightly jellyfish. The size of this iris is the stability. Thanks, dude. The size is the stability. So as it becomes more unstable, the wormhole will shrink. The more mass that passes through a wormhole, the more ships that fly through the wormhole, the smaller and smaller and smaller it gets until it's just a little tiny guy, and then it will go vanish and disappear. And finally, these wispy lines, these wonderful wisps that go out and back in that circle the wormhole, these wisps tell you what size ships can fly through here. So these gray wisps, like old gray hair, that means that large ships can go through here. Blue, like very bright blue, beautiful little blue wisps mean only small, tiny ships can go through here. And medium ships are kind of like a teal color. So this nullsec one, this is also large ships. Gray wispiness. Quick poll of the audience. How many ships are inside our wormhole right now that we know of? That's right. 5. Because Duffy's still here. They just went to the sizable perimeter reservoir again. We're going to try again, Duffy. They really want that gas. My goodness. Let's see if this is a trap. Yeah, exactly. 3 Proteus behind you. Want to see the wormhole that goes to the secret cow level? Dude, that would be spectacular. See how quick this venture can warp off. Very quick, I imagine. Unless they reconfigured for PvP. That would be tight. Oh, another Tengu's here. Yes, perfect. And a Proteus.
Warp drive active.
See? Always a trap. Always a trap. Goodbye, Venture. Well played, though. Well played. Yeah, so who here thought that that was going to be a trap, huh? I know I did. Everything is bait in wormhole space, by the way. Everything is bait. Always be ready for that. Raises my hand? Yeah, exactly. So, it's out in nullsec. Now, I don't really recognize this too much. That little guy there. That little nebula. There is kind of this orangey-looking nebula guy here. So let's go ahead and pull in one of the tools that we can use to identify where things are in K-space, which is pretty much a picture. Let's see. Picture of some of the sort of nebulae that are all in K-space. So you can kind of use to help sort of identify things. So, like, the ring is a super obvious one. There is, I know, like a little belt down here. So, like, see this little nebula here? I think that this nullsec spot is down here somewhere. It could be over here, but it's pretty far away from whatever the orange nebula is that is nearby it. I like to use this a bunch. This is pretty sweet. I can throw a link for this in the description or a link in the chat if you guys want it. It's just like a little PDF file. I might even have it on my Discord. I might have it on the Discord. So let's take a look. Now, I don't want to go through this wormhole and give myself away necessarily. We will in a second here, but I don't necessarily want to go through there right now. So that's the little nebula I'm looking at. And I think it's kind of down in the south. So let's pull this guy up. And take a look down here. I think it might be kind of down in this direction, right? So let's pick a planet here. Let's go to this system. Zoom all the way in. Whoop, there we go. And then let's click on show info on a planet in a system that we think might be kind of nearby. We're going to click on view planetary industry. Oh, look. We can see what it would look like if I were in that system. Look how gigantic that nebula is. There's a bunch of nebulae here. You can see that there is, see that? That kind of gray streak there. Yeah, that looks about right. That looks about right. There's that big orange nebula. Now this guy's a little bright here. So we might, maybe we're a little off. Maybe we're a little bit off. But there's that kind of bright one. And then there's this sort of streak here. Look at that brightness there. Is that might be the New Eden Nebula? Like the Eden Gate? Let's take a look again. Let's try again. Let's see. Eden Gate is kind of over here. It could be by Fountain, maybe. I don't think it's up by the outer ring so much over there. Let's try this guy. Eden Gate's like right over here. Let's try something over here. See what's in this region. I'm not as good at this as other people are, but we know the method, though. We know the method. View planetary industry. So there's that. That nebula is pretty close. Yeah, so it's not over here. We're too far into that nebula. It's kind of more back where we were before. So it's probably a lot more. It's on this side. Maybe it's way down here. Let's take a look at this. How about this little guy? What's in here? Any planets here I can view for some industry? Yeah, view planetary industry. Oh, yes. Yes, this looks like it could be promising. There's that gray spot there. Let's see how far off we are. We're probably like way far off. I'm really not good at this. Okay. So, anytime you jump through a wormhole, it doesn't matter where you're going. Anytime you jump through a wormhole, the first thing we're going to do is descan. Is there anything on D-scan? No. Then we're going to right click on the wormhole. We're going to save location. I use an up arrow and then the actual type or class of the wormhole. I use a little up dash thing, whatever it's called, up caret, to let me know that that is where I came from. That is my originating place. That is my technique and strategy for that. That makes it super easy to manage the chain and know where I came from, and kind of not necessarily where I went, but it tells me where I came from. Okay, so there's one person here in local, Freeze Man, wherever that guy is. There's nothing on D-scan though. They might be over here. We've bookmarked our system. Let's go check out. Let's go warp to this guy here.
Active.
We'll reload to rages, and we're going to cloak up here as well. I'm not going to bother to scan down this wormhole because there's only one cosmic signature right now. And while we're on our way, a weak metaliminal gamma ray system. Ooh, interesting. While we're on our way over here to just D-scan and see if that other person is over here, let's take a look at where we are in space. Way off. We were way off. This is where we are. We were by, like, drone space or something over here, by the spire. Way off. Anyway, that's kind of the way that you do it. I'm still practicing and getting to learn all the regions as much as we can. So we didn't do a good job on that one. We did a bad job on that one. But sometimes we can get pretty close. Sometimes we get really close. We just started an alliance. The Children of the Chain Alliance. Now, if any of you know anything about wormhole space, you'll know that it is populated by chaotic, tribal, crazy, wonderful corporations, all making their way through what many believe to be the most dangerous, lawless land in all of New Eden, even beyond that of Nullsec. The Children of the Chain Alliance is going to unite all of the tribes of wormhole space together, that one day we may rise up against those in known space, against Nullsec, Lowsec, and Highsec, and all of Anoikis shall spill forth from their wormholes to lay fire to the laws and the orders and the stargates of K-space, and let them know that chaos, that impermanence, is the will of Bob. Bob, the next coming of Bob, is soon. Anyway, if you guys would like to join us in that event, to unite all of J-Space together and go and assault all of known space with a massive amount of blue loot and gas behind us, you are absolutely welcome to. Praise Bob! Praise Bob! Here's an example of how you can make a perch at a site that is somewhere here in Anoikis, right? Really, it's anywhere. I found this to be the most successful. Again, the goal for a perch is to be greater than 150 kilometers from the site you're going to, so that you can pre-position ships at that perch and jump to the location to effect kills, or tackle, or hunt, do that kind of stuff, right? Or just watch something, see what's on grid, observe. We do a lot of that in J-Space. So we've got a perch here for this gas site, but let's say I want to make a perch for this token perimeter reservoir gas site. So, Control B to open up my bookmark menu. I'm going to call this one a token perch. Why not? I put an exclamation mark in there too. I want it at the top of my little bookmark list here. I'm not going to hit submit yet, but we're going to wait. Now what we're going to do is we're going to jump to this token perimeter reservoir. I'm going to jump at 70 clicks to make sure I'm not hitting 0, because that's scary. And then I'm going to watch right here, right above my capacitor and all my modules. It'll say warping to, and it'll give me the distance remaining to the warp location. Once I see that it hits less than 10,000 kilometers, we're going to save the bookmark. And that should get us pretty close. Should get us pretty close to what we want. There are other ways to do this where you get very specific. So if I really wanted to like make sure I had this bookmark at 200 kilometers, I could jump to 0 on this gas site right here. Jump to a different... Sorry, I would jump to 100 kilometers on the gas site. Then make a bookmark. Jump away. Then I would jump to 100 on the 100 kilometer bookmark that I had previously made. Make another bookmark. Now I'm probably around 200 kilometers from the center of that gas site. Does that make sense? So I can make one bookmark that is less accurate with a single jump by looking down here at my distance above the capacitor. And once I hit less than around 10,000, but really I'm trying to, like, once I hit less than around 3,000 kilometers, I'm going to make that bookmark. That should get me relatively close. At least I will definitely be on grid, which is what I care about. Or I can do multiple jumps to get it to a very specific place. If I want to. All right, so let's try making this token perch. This is the way I like to do it. Because I like to do things quickly and just do one pass, move as fast as we can, rather than take a whole ton of time. Especially since we often are leaving our wormholes. All right, so we're looking down here. We're at 100, 2,000. There we go. Make our save spot. So when we saw it said distance 2,000 kilometers, we made our save spot. Look at that. We're at 400 kilometers away. Not too bad. Couple of rats on this token site are here. Hello, little ones. No big deal. We'll go ahead and cloak up here to avoid these rats. But we're on grid. We're 400 kilometers away from the center point. Nailed it. Not too bad. Not too bad. So let's say we just came out of this nullsec wormhole. And I thought to myself, man, I really would love to have a perch point for that wormhole. Now remember, perch points are bookmarks that are greater than 150 kilometers away from another bookmark or a site or a wormhole or a gate or whatever, so that from the perch you can warp to the other bookmark or the other location. But not so far away that you're off grid. We need to be on grid and greater than 150 kilometers away for our perch point. That's the goal for a perch point. The closer, the faster your warp will be. Generally, I try to make my perch points around 150 or 200 to 300-ish. I like to get out to around 200-ish if I can, because there are very few enemies that can lock and shoot me at 200 kilometers. They're out there for sure. I've been killed by paladins that were sniping people from 200 clicks away before. So I try to be outside of lock range and outside of weapon range if I can, and still be able to warp quickly to a location. So we talked about a little bit yesterday on how to make those. You can either do it with dropping a bookmark as you're in warp from long distance to that location, and then just drop that when you are looking down at your distance remaining right above your capacitor. Once that hits below around 1,000-ish clicks, that's where I'll drop that to try and get it close. If you're below 3,000 clicks to landing, that generally is going to get your bookmark on grid and definitely greater than 150 kilometers out. So that works okay. Here's another way to do it, though. That's I don't think very well learned or well known. I was taught this on the first time I went into JSpace, and I didn't really use it too much, but we're using it more often now. So how do you use your scanner probes to make a perch point? We're going to deploy our scanners out. And let's go ahead and center our map on ourselves here. Here we are. We're going to deploy these guys out. And then we're going to center the formation on our ship. Okay, so now all of our scanners are going to fly to us, be centered on us. You can actually see them here on grid. They're 2,000 meters away. When we deployed them, they show up right next to you, right? So they're 2,000 meters away. Oh, you guys can't see that. Let me get rid of my face cam here so you can see this better. There we go. So you can see them on our overview here, 2,000 meters away. We want to get these guys a little farther away from us, because then we can use them. So what are we going to do? We're going to go from our 4AU scan size down to 0.25 AU. So we reduce our scanners a whole bunch here. Alt and then scroll wheel to do that. Now I'm going to hold control and I'm going to scroll to make a sphere of scanners here, like a little sphere bubble. There's kind of an art to doing this. And you got to experiment a little bit, but we're just going to make it a perfect sphere here. So all these guys are in a little perfect orb. You would never really scan with these. It doesn't do a great job of resolving signatures. But now we're going to scan, and that's going to fly our scanner probes into this formation around us. Okay. This worked perfectly, actually. It actually even did scan down the wormhole, which is impressive. So now that we've flown those into this little formation around us, you can see, lo and behold, all of our scanner probes are here on grid with us, but they are 190 kilometers away, 200 kilometers away, 282 kilometers away. That's perfect. A perfect little perch point has been made. All we have to do now is right-click on the scanner probe on grid, hit save location, and label our little perch point. Amazing. So, now we've got our perch point made. We can jump to that, and we are ready to rock and roll. I'll use this for making perch points for gas sites, for relic sites, for wormholes, all that kind of stuff. And what makes this even faster is if you go up here to your actual little signature list, your cosmic signature list here, where your probe scanners are, this little third button here is how you can save formations. So let's save our current formation here. And we would name this Perch, because we like that it worked for us there. Save that perch, and then when we click on this guy, it brings up that saved formation. So I can set my formation to the standard pinpoint formation, which you can see out here. Makes it look like these sort of typical bubbles you're used to. There's obviously the spread formation, which nobody ever uses, ever, as far as I can tell. I'm sure there is a use for them. Probably like scanning an entire system down at once. Anyway, so from there we've got our saved one. Boom. Click on the save. It brings it to the size, the formation. Everything's good to go. Center that on our ship. Scan. And then our little scanner probes will show back up on grid with us to make our perch point. There they are. Yay! We did it.